Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone can hear me, and welcome to the Dematic Real-Time Logistics webinar series. What I'd like to do is really take us back through the journey we've been on through what we're calling our Warehouse Technology Evolution series. And that started through the latter part of last year. We kicked off with a couple of webinars on Android in the warehouse. What does it mean and what is the opportunity? And at those webinars, we had we had Zebra and Honeywell, two global leaders in providing solutions devices for warehouses, really talk through how Android impacted their technologies and the business gains it provided to businesses. Along the same lines, we had Avanti, another global leader, and Avanti specializes in emulation solutions, and they talked us through how their TE, their terminal emulation modernization solution, again provided some real business gains for organizations. We then sort of shifted a little bit and focused on Wi-Fi networks, really around management and security is becoming a very common discussion we're having with organizations, and it's really from Extreme, again, another global leader in providing Wi-Fi networks, and they talked us through really why high quality, reliable, and compliant networks are a necessity for supply chain organizations. Today, we're sort of going to wrap that all up and talk about the environments and really talk through mobile device security and management for distribution. With us, we've got SOTI, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But really, the premise is that proactive management of your technology environment is no longer optional. So what I want to do is just back up and talk through why we're going through this. If we take a look at the technology environment for companies and supply chains, specifically in distribution centers or warehouses, we're really seeing a shift from that technology that's driving the control, some of the decisions and management, in summary, from operations to IT for a bunch of reasons. So So there's a couple of elements that have been driving that. One is the transition to Android. So Windows CE is becoming end of life, and it's really a challenge around a different environment where you've got an operating system, Android, that's designed for a consumer environment and not an industrial environment. So what does that mean? Well, you've got an operating system that comes out with regular updates, and how do you manage those updates generally? What's the impact on security? The other piece that drives is really a tie between Android, the operating system, and technology. For companies or those of you that purchased solutions early in the Android migration, you may be in a stage where the Android operating system version you're running is not upgradable, and you're sort of stuck at that technology platform because you're unable to upgrade it based on the technology. So there's a real tie between the operating system and the technology platform. The second piece is really this drive from in the warehouse from shifting from a TE or terminal emulation operating environment to one where applications are running on devices. So, as the WMS, the business systems build out Android applications to run on mobile devices, it really changes that environment that you're operating in. More and more devices are being added to the warehouse operation for many, many different functions. Tablets are being added for supervisors, You've got, and that can be a tablet, it can be a PDA, you've got phones, you've got, voice devices, you've got all sorts of stuff. So the domain of it just being a barcode scanner has just changed. Your environment in a warehouse has a wide range of devices. And probably even, becoming a real theme is around security. No longer is it okay just to plug in a device on your Wi-Fi network and away you go. Security is a real big issue, both from a data protection point of view and to security of your network not getting hacked and affecting other parts of your business. And as the saying goes, there's two types of companies, those that have been hacked and those that will be. So that really leads to that premise I talked about, where in that environment with all those changes, you're really in a situation where you really need to be proactively managing the technology environment you're in. It's no longer an option. It's something that should be mandatory in your environment. My name is Brian Lang. I'm the Regional Director for the Dematic Real-Time Logistics Business in APAC. Joining me today is Michael Dyson from SOTI. Just a bit on Michael and give you a bit of a bio. Over the last 16 years, Mike has been working to deliver a wide variety of mobility solutions for mission and business critical applications. He has extensive experience across distribution, emergency service, transportation logistics, and the field service sector, giving him a unique understanding of the challenges working in a harsh and remote environments, and he can present the importance of being able to successfully deploy, manage, and support fit-for-purpose technology. In the time I've working with Michael, he definitely displays a genuine passion for expanding the use of mobile technology and specifically enhancing the benefits gained from its implementation. As the Managing Director for Australia, New Zealand, and Southeast Asia, Michael is working to assist organizations to deploy, manage, secure all forms of mobile technology. Michael, welcome.
Thank you very much, Brian, and it's greatly appreciated, the opportunity for you to get us here today to speak to a number of your clients across the region.
Great. And what I'll do is I'll turn it over. Oh, sorry, just some housekeeping before we start. The webinar will go for probably around 40 or 45 minutes. If you do have questions, please enter them in the text chat box, and we will attempt to answer the questions at the end of the session. So what I'd like to do now is to turn it over to Michael, and he can run us through SOTI and their solution.
Thanks, Brian. Much appreciated. As I said before, thanks very much to Dematic for allowing us the opportunity to speak to all of you fine folk. I wanted just to throw a couple of interesting facts out there about, we talked, and Brian led into this very much, about mobile device and mobile device security. A couple of interesting facts. More than half of all company data is now accessed outside the corporate network, so people with devices that can be in any sort of place in any location. People also tell me all the time that, oh, this is the cost of our deployment, we're buying these devices or this infrastructure. And the reality is that the cost is not just what you put up front, it's the cost of supporting and deploying and managing that solution and those solutions for the period of the life of the product. And in a dynamic environment, it's no longer a static environment like the old Windows CE was. It's very much a dynamic environment. It's changing all the time. You have to manage on an ongoing basis, and you have to reduce the costs associated with managing technology in the field on an ongoing basis. And this one's a little bit scary for some people. 70% of workplace devices or devices that have got access to a network are unmanaged, which means 70% of those things in your hand or on your desk or wherever are potentially at risk from a security challenge that Brian was speaking about earlier. Quick one for those people who know nothing about SOTI. SOTI's a company that's over 20 years old. We're approaching 1,000 staff. and we're an organisation that specifically works in the mobile device management and mobility management space across right across the world. We've got locations in some 10 countries, offices in some 10 countries, I should say, as well as we work in, I think it's 28 countries now. We've actually got representatives on the dirt, as well as being right across the world. We've got development centres and software development centres. The vast majority of the people in SOTI's organisation are about developing the technology. So it's quite a mature thing. For this region, it's very important to know that all of the technical support for Australia, New Zealand and across Southeast Asia comes out of the region. It's not supported overseas, although we do have 24/7 support across the world as the out of hours, if you will, but it's all supported locally and quite strong, and we're growing our offices. A little bit more just to give you again characters of the types of organisations, and I'll just pick on 2 organisations. If you talk about transport and logistics and postal and all of those sort of areas, the United States Postal Service is our largest client worldwide with some 465,000 seats under management. People like American Airlines on a worldwide basis, 120,000 seats plus. Tesco, right across the globe, over 100,000 seats. So some very large organisations. And going specifically to the ANZ space, Australia Post would be our largest client. So you look at people like the Kmarts of the world and the Coles of the world and the Tolls and the Linfoxes. So we have clients and a lot of clients in this space. What I wanted to sort of address, I suppose, and this is the same discussion I have with people from a wide range of industries, is that we're confronted by literally a tsunami of mobile devices. We are being confronted, and there's more and more, both in a consumer sense and in a commercial sense, right across the world. For distribution centres, the growth in the numbers and the use of this technology is going to be an enormous challenge to manage and secure, but also to deploy efficiently and to support properly. But mobility is now the cornerstone of technology strategies for industries across the globe. Organisations are doubling down on their mobility spend, and they're doubling down on putting technology in the hands. And the reasons they're doing that is in first instance to differentiate their business, to make their business better and compared to their competitor. Streamlining of operations is obvious. The ability to be able to have their users efficiently doing what they need to do to meet customer experience and therefore boost the customer experience is critical, and actually to empower their people. A lot of organisations across many industries have said to me that if their people don't believe that we're investing in technology to make ourselves better and make ourselves a better organisation, they'll look elsewhere. People will leave organisations because the organisation they're working for, they perceive is not keeping up with it. So it's a real challenge in the sense that organisations are addressing this, but they have to. But then you've got to look at the challenges that creates. A lot of legacy systems, shall we call them, the old systems that people have been using, and integrating new technology into the complex web of potential, a number of different backbones and platforms, is a real challenge. So that integration piece has to be addressed. Obviously security, and we keep coming back to that topic, struggle to secure their mobile strategies and have secure mobile strategies for the organisation. The management of the devices, and we'll talk a little bit more about that obviously as we go through this. But 80% of companies just don't feel they've optimised their investment in mobility. And for that to be, and it's a relatively recent survey in the last 12 months, so for that to be the case, there is a lot to learn and a lot of challenges to be confronted in the deployment, support and management of mobility. Specifically looking at the mission and business critical mobility though, when we surveyed the specific thing around mission and business, security came up as being a very significant issue. And I'll talk specifically about security in a minute. The costs associated with deploying applications, the costs associated with developing and testing applications for organisations and implementing them into environments was an issue that came up. The complexity, as we said before, of integration into legacy systems was a big issue. but 69% of people indicated downtime was downtime of critical applications was a significant cost to their business. If you can get a reduction in the downtime, if you can optimize the productivity, then you can make a damn sight more of your mobile investments. Specifically going to security, and I'm sure most, if not everyone on the call, will be familiar with GDPR, General Data Protection Regulation, which is the regulation from Europe, but basically it's about who's responsible for securing information that's within the control of an organisation. In Australia, it's the National Data Breach legislation that was introduced in February 2017 and is managed by the ACSC. The information that's in our hands is our responsibility as organisations. In the July 2017 report, it specifically said that the use of stolen credentials accounted for 77% of all cyber incidents in that previous quarter. So the availability of mobile devices and the potential for people to somehow hack those devices or use those devices, or people might share passwords, people might lose passwords, there's all sorts of exercises, but you must have a device that's managed and secure, because it's a very significant weak point, if you will. And the liability exists for any business with a revenue over $3 million. Significant penalties can apply for data breaches. So when security is so important, you've got to understand that at the end point, you must manage how secure that device is. And legislation's really clear. The information might be as simple as an email address or a phone number. Clearly, obviously, if you've got significant custody in the data or financial information you're responsible for, then that information is even more sensitive. But it is a really important point that people understand. Mobility is, if not more vulnerable, it's at least as vulnerable as your backbone network. So you've got to address that security piece in the mobility environment. One of the other things specifically I wanted to talk about today in terms of mobile device management is that it is our responsibility, whatever organisation we're in, to provide a safe workplace. And hand in hand with the warehouse and distribution sector comes the transport and logistics and goods to and from, and indeed in the warehouse itself. So ensuring that people adhere to safe work practices is a really important factor. There's environmental dangers that people can face, and as Brian alluded to before, my experience has often been in the field space with field service organisations, and so confronting environmental dangers applies very widely in that area, but it equally applies in vehicles. And there's also location-based risks. It might be that people are confronted with challenging locations or remote locations, and so being able to provide a safer work environment is something that actually people just don't think of using mobile device management or mobile device technology for, but it is a significant benefit in this space. Moving forward, sorry, just clicking on the slide. So vehicles are defined as a workplace, whether those vehicles are within the space of a distribution centre or whether they're on their way to or from. And treating a vehicle as a workplace means that we've got to provide a safe workplace. We've got to look at how we can do that. And distracted driving is a really big issue we all confront, both from a consumer perspective, driving along, and we're all not allowed to touch our phones, but how many of us do? The reality is, as an organisation, if we have people driving or riding on vehicles that need that they need to interact with a mobile device to do their job, then we must look at ways of ensuring that they do so in a safe manner. My catchphrase, if you like, which is you either mitigate the risk, you take reasonable steps to mitigate risk, or you face the reality. A bit like Brian said before, you either have been hacked or you will be, or you either have been sued or you will be. Litigation is now commonplace, and taking reasonable steps to mitigate that risk is a really important factor, and I'll talk specifically a little bit about that. So managing environmental risks, enabling your support teams and support people to be able to remotely support your workers in the field and mandate safe work practices is a really important thing that mobile device management adds to all of the things that people think about mobile device management for historically, the enrollment and all of that. And we'll talk about that, but it's a really important element to consider, that safety and security, these two elements, are really big contributions that mobile device management can make to what you're doing in your workplaces. So going a little bit specifically to what SOTI's able to do and what SOTI's background is. I said before, SOTI's been around 20 years, and most organisations who are, I suppose, in this space will be familiar with some form of the mobile device management that we've done over the years, particularly in the Windows CE environment in this space. But SOTI's mobile device management platform, or EMM, MobiControl, here on the right-hand top circle, is the core product that's been around within the SOTI infrastructure, if you will, for some 20 plus years. This mobile device management is absolutely suited to be able to support all sorts of devices of any operating system. But what we've done is we've developed now a full SOTI One platform, and I'm not going to touch on all of that today, but it provides a whole range of ancillary services and capabilities that round out what people need to do in a mobile environment. So when we're talking about the role that mobile device management plays for you as a customer and for organisations like our partners at Dematic who support you in your workplaces and in your environments, it's all about the complete life cycle. From the provisioning of the device and the enrolment of the device so that it takes on the characteristics the way you want it to behave when it's deployed, and automate that deployment and enrolment process so that it expedites that. You don't end up with a situation of touching every physical device in the new world. You can actually set them all up remotely and very, very quickly so that your deployment can be, deployment period can be shortened and made more effective, to then managing the device once it's in the field and actually being able to remote control the device so that you can remotely support your people, to all of the security elements. And we'll talk a little bit about Android Enterprise specifically, but to the security elements, you have to be able to do updates to those security patches on a regular basis to be complying with the secure piece. So it enables you to do that silently and over the air, to management of content and applications, and again, the updating of those silently over the air. And then at the end of life, the retirement of the device, the ability to be able to, if the device is lost, broken, or simply reaching end of useful life, to be able to shut that device down and to be able to know that that device is then not able to be accessed by anyone who shouldn't be using it for other purposes. So it's the entire lifecycle management that we look to achieve through utilising SOTI's mobile device management platform. As I mentioned earlier, there is a myriad of different devices now in use in all sorts of industries, but specifically looking at your industry, specifically looking at the warehousing and transport and logistics industries, almost invariably in an environment, there'll be a mix of operating system devices. There'll be probably Windows PCs, there'll be possibly smartphones of any sort of operating system, then tablets, as Brian alluded to before, but also RFID scanners or barcode scanners. And those RFID scanners nowadays from, again, Brian mentioned Zebra before. Zebra's RFID scanners are now a Linux-based technology. So managing a Linux-based platform is something that nobody does properly, and that's something that we now do and work with the partners like Zebra to come up with those solutions. The supporting of rugged devices is our core business and has been for a very long period. We closely partner with the Honeywells and the Zebras of the world, as Brian suggested before, but also managing things like kiosks and point of sale in retail and those sort of things. And even now augmented reality. But critically, if you look at all of the operating systems that are used in any of these fields, we can manage all the platforms, giving you a single environment able to manage all the devices, and moving forward, lots of other connected endpoints, if you will, we'll be able to manage those as well. But right now, it's about all of the devices, printers included in many warehouses. We manage all of the Zebra printers as well in the new Zebra platform. So specifically looking at applications in the distribution center space, traditional methods of supporting and managing vehicle-mounted devices has to change and is changing. I know that Dematic's very strong in this space, but being able to manage those devices and effectively support the users is critically important remotely, so that they are optimizing productivity and minimizing the downtime. And it is a dynamic environment. It changes all the time. Applications, again, in this space, being able to manage, as I said, things like printers, barcode scanners, and headless RFID devices, and even potentially down the track or now, augmented or virtual reality glasses and those sort of things that are being used. Being able to manage all of those devices on a single platform, being able to see them, being able to see what's happening with them, and being able to remotely support them on a single platform is a real advantage. What's happening now, and again, Brian alluded to this very strongly, the reality is in January 2020 is the end of extended support for the old Windows CE platform. And realistically, you either are, or you have, or you will be moving to an Android platform in this environment is almost certainly the case. And I would imagine there's very few people on this WebEx that would not be already either considering it or have already taken the step into the land of Android. And Android Enterprise is the big step too for the newer Android platforms. So for people who are looking at using Android devices from Android 6 and onwards, the ability and the way we will treat and manage devices is very different from those who were early adopters, if you like, of the Android platform and have devices that precede the Android 6 platform. Almost all the new devices, in fact, I think all the new devices from the partners we were talking about earlier are all now Android 8 and going beyond that, and Android 7 certainly. So all of them can be treated differently now, and all of them can be enrolled in Android platform using the Android Enterprise platform, I should say. Android Enterprise, as I'm sure many of you are aware, is Google's platform that is designed to do a number of things, but in reality, it standardizes policies and APIs to work across all of the OEMs and manufacturers to create a consistent set of policies. And most importantly, from Google's perspective, it provides an absolute certainty that if you configure and deploy and manage devices in an Android Enterprise recommended environment, that you can completely control the security of that deployment. And again, a lot of people on the call will be familiar with the Google Play Store, but Google Managed Play as part of Android Enterprise is a shut down, if you will, Google Managed Play Store that organizations can use to allow access for their users to only have access to the applications that you want them to have access to support that inside a Google Managed Play Store. Utilizing the Android Enterprise platform will allow you to be certain of the security of the applications being used in your environments. For us and for Google, obviously, supporting many vendors, over 170 Android OEM manufacturers SOTI works with, and working closely with the vendors, and the biggest two being Zebra and Honeywell, working closely with those vendors to actually be able to really deep dive into their devices and manage all elements of their devices is a really critical thing, because it does, as I said before, not only expedite the deployment, but it really enables support to be provided to users very quickly and very efficiently. So I'm going to touch predominantly today in my last part of the presentation on the SOTI MobiControl platform and how it actually impacts and the key elements that make life a lot easier for organizations. The SOTI Assist and Snap I won't touch on too deeply, but these are the future elements which incorporates a diagnostic help desk and a rapid app development tool, and we can talk about that another time. But I'm going to focus on the mobile device management element of it, SOTI MobiControl. And the ability for that platform to be able to secure and manage all endpoints, to be able to streamline critical workflows, and as I said before, eliminate mobile downtime. So MobiControl, firstly, is able to provide support for all of the different platforms we talked about: Android, Windows, Linux, iOS, all sorts of others, and indeed printers, and enroll and stage devices out of the box. So in a very efficient and quick manner, and using the Android Enterprise platform moving forward, it just gets faster and faster and easier and easier. It's particularly optimized for rugged device, but I wanted to focus just on 3 elements of what we do in MobiControl. The first is our ability to do kiosk mode lockdown in a HTML format. Our kiosk mode lockdown allows organizations to have the device locked down to be able to ensure that the users can access exactly what they need to do their job, and only what they need to do their job. It's really important that if you've got a device in the field and deployed, that users, given that it's coming from a consumer background, the old Google platform or the Google platform comes from, Android platform comes from a consumer background, the ability for people to go off and access other applications or surf websites or use it in a non-business fashion is there, unless we can lock the device down and lock it down to allow users to do what they need to do, have access to everything they need to have access to do their job, and nothing else. The other thing that our kiosk mode lockdown enables people to do, and this is, as I alluded to before, about the safe workplace. We have the ability within our kiosk mode lockdown to detect the accelerometer in the devices, such as the Zebra and Honeywell devices, so that once a vehicle reaches a speed as designated in the system, the device can be shut down or shut down all other applications and limit access for the user to only, for example, mapping if they're driving a truck. So the ability to ensure that your users are not distracted drivers, quotation marks, the ability to ensure that they can only access what it is you want them to access once the vehicle's moving at a set speed that you determine. These things are really important in the T&L sector, and obviously that flows directly into this sector as well. It might be forklifts, it might be you choose to set the speed lockdown to a very low with forks in environments, and so that only what they're supposed to be doing, there can be no chance of someone who's driving a fork through a warehouse being distracted by something else on the screen, because we can lock the device down to ensure that they can only access what it is they need to access to do their job. This is a completely unique feature that SOTI has in the Android environment. The second thing I wanted to talk about specifically on the device management is remote support. The ability to fully remote control all Android devices, the ability to view and interact with any hardware button on the device, the ability to turn off, turn on any element of the device. We could turn the camera on, we could kill an application, we could update an application, we can do anything remotely on that device with a connection. The ability to provide that remote control and full remote support is where we gain an enormous amount of productivity for organizations, because they simply don't have to think it'll work. They know it'll work. They know that they can support the users in the field. And this is why we've been very successful in large organizations like the Australia Posts of the world and the Coles and the Kmarts. So reducing user downtime is where our remote control really steps up and has a big impact. And the final one I wanted to talk about in terms of the 3 elements was location-based services. And for organizations with a fixed distribution center, they kind of know where they are. But we used this example with a client the other day, which was that quite simply, they were sending 8 or 10 devices, I think it was, from one distribution center to another distribution center because there was a large stock take to be undertaken and they didn't have sufficient equipment. And historically, they would box those devices up and they would send them off. and they'd get to the new location, and the new location would ring IT, and IT would say, yep, you've got the devices, we'll get to it, and we'll do the reconfiguration so that those devices will connect to the wireless at that distribution center, etc., in a manual fashion. By implementing polygon-based geofencing rules, we're able to provide that client with the ability to just put the devices in the box, send them to the new location. When they turned on at the new location, the system detects where they are, changes the profile of the device, and the device is automatically operational in the new location, connected to the appropriate Wi-Fi, etc. That's just one example of how polygon-based geofencing can make the efficiencies of transferring devices from one location to another, one store to another, or from a store to a distribution center. It might be that people are multi-purposing devices. We all need to make the most benefits of using these devices. So this capability and the way we do this is quite unique to what SOTI MobiControl can do. I've left a little bit of information here in relation to the SOTI Assist platform, which is a fully integrated diagnostic help desk. So if you can imagine, by having the remote control we talked about earlier, you will significantly reduce, if not eliminate, the number of times a device comes back and there's a no fault found. The device is actually nothing wrong with it. That remote control enables you to do. But we get to the point, okay, we now do have a device failure. We need to create a ticket for this device to be triaged and to be sent back to the manufacturer for repair or whatever it is that you have to do. Having the potential capability to have a fully integrated help desk where simply within that remote control that I was talking about, in the device management I was talking about before, you simply click on a button that says create ticket, and it then populates all of the information into a completely integrated help desk, is incredibly time efficient, because no longer is there the entering of the data about what the device is and serial numbers and all of the other things, and all of the information that was already sitting in the mobile device management platform then transfers directly into the integrated help desk. This is an enormous time saver. And so for those people who are not running a substantive large help desk that they already might have, the ServiceNow or whatever it is they might use, this is an enormously great time saver and potentially cost saver. The final thing I wanted to talk about in relation to the MobiControl is this ability for us to provide for organisations an enterprise support platform, 24/7 around-the-clock support for larger organisations, a dedicated technical account manager where it's over 500 seats. But the ability to provide enterprise support 24/7 with a free test and development environment so that people can add and test what new devices are coming in and all of those sort of things. Again, depending on the organisation, enterprise support is clearly designed for the larger organisations and with 24/7 operations that need to have support of a more granular nature. My final request is, and wish to all of you, and invitation to all of you, is we hold on an annual basis an event called SOTI Sync, which is for both partners and end users and visionaries alike. And it's to be held in October in Toronto, in Canada, and you would be more than welcome, and the information is all there on that link. With that, I'm just going to click on that again. I think I have reached the end of my section, and I thank you all very much for taking the time to listen to me, and I believe I'll hand back to Brian.
Great, thanks, Michael. That was really good. So just going back and taking a look at sort of the premise of the environment we talked about, a shift from an industrial operating system environment to a more consumer one with regular upgrades where technology and the operating system are tied, moving from a TE to an application environment, more and more mobile devices, and not only mobile devices, different types of devices being added to the network, security issues around not only legislation around managing data, but simply security of your business data and protecting that, and really that drive to you have to be in a mode where you're proactively managing that environment. So, I put the diagram you had in, and I think that that the tool that SOTI has, the SOTI One platform, definitely enables you to manage either your transition to or your time in that environment. Questions? So we did get a couple of questions, so we'll take a couple of minutes and ask those. And it's good to see that the questions are very relevant to distribution centers and devices in that specifically. So Michael, maybe you can help me answer these. The first one, can SOTI manage customers who have older Windows devices and are changing to Android?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Brian. So probably the classic example of this was a project that was done in Europe quite recently in the last 18 months, which was the Belgian Post environment. Belgian Post had some 6,000, roughly, Windows legacy devices that they had made the decision to transition across to a new Honeywell device. And we were the existing incumbent mobile device management platform for them. The ability for us to deprecate the old devices, transition across to the Android environment, transition to the new devices, and simply they didn't really have to buy any more licenses. They simply deprecated the old ones and put new devices onto those old licenses. But we assisted them with professional services, and the ability to be able to help people transition from one platform to another is a key capability, yeah, for sure.
Great. The second, and I guess this is really relevant to the change to the Android operating system environment. What happens if we have to update or apply a security patch for our Android operating system version? Can we use SOTI to do that?
Yeah, once again, being able to remotely and silently over the air do all updates, be they application updates or firmware updates or even OS updates, can be done silently over the air and can be scheduled so that they don't interrupt business practice. So they can be done, all of the regression testing can be done in the test environment that I talked about on a series of test devices. And then once all of that testing is done, it can be implemented, scheduled and planned that these updates happen silently over the air in the background so that people come in on, quote, Monday morning and they've got the devices updated and it's all been done without them laying a finger on the device.
Great. Yeah, and just a comment on that, and I think that's really important. A lot of the conversations we're having with customers are around IT. I guess not intervening, but having a policy around security, and specifically when you're moving to Android, having a mandated process to push out security patches and updates where in a previous environment that may have been not the case. So that's a great feature. And just one more question, because I know we're pressed for time a little bit. And again, another thing that we continually talk to customers about, how does SOTI handle devices that are lost or damaged?
Yeah, another great question, because realistically, that's a high-level security risk. As soon as a device where you don't know where it is, well, you don't know how it's being used. So we can do it in a number of ways. We can do it by an out-of-contact policy being applied to the device. So a device could be automatically locked if it's, for example, out of contact for 4 hours, if that's what you want to set it to be. We could do it by geolocation. If a device is detected to have left a certain location, it could be automatically locked or it could be shut down. Not wiped, but simply put into lock mode so that a message comes up on the screen of the device and said, this device has been locked, please return to, for example. But an administrator also, with the platform being used, can receive an alert as well about an out-of-contact device or an out-of-location device. So that management is all integrated into the SOTI platform.
Great, fantastic. Okay. So I guess just in closing, there's a couple of takeaways that we're interested in getting out, and one is don't shy away from the technology evolution and stay where you are. we're confident. We know from just looking at the technology and our understanding of supply chains and customers we've worked with in the transition, that there are really significant benefits that can be realized in your business by, embracing this journey and looking at new technology and how it can help. So, embrace the technology evolution and realize those benefits. The second is really the premise of the whole presentation is that, you're moving into an environment where, management of the technology has to be proactive. You can't simply just put a device out there, let it run, and then, next year, next month, next year, go and figure out what's happening with that device. A mobile device management solution is almost a mandatory requirement for that new environment. So those are really the two takeaways. What you should do next, both Michael and his team and the Dematic team would be thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to you about, where you are on that journey and how we can help you, one, realize the benefits, and two, manage the environment you're going into. So with that, I'll close. Thanks everybody for their time. I hope they found it of value. We're going to put this on our social media platforms and circulate it to those who attended. But again, if you have any questions, if we can help in any way, please feel free to reach out to anybody on the Dematic or SOTI team, or Michael and I specifically. Great. Thanks everybody.
Thank you so much, Brian.